Have you ever wondered why the prices of things like food, gas, or even housing seem to keep going up over time? Well, that's inflation at work. But what exactly is inflation? And how does it impact your money? Whether you're just starting to manage your finances or you're looking to make smarter investment choices, understanding inflation is key to protecting your wealth. In today's video, we'll break down what inflation is, how it affects your savings, investments, and even your everyday spending, and what you can do to navigate it. Let's dive in. 1. Definition of inflation. Inflation refers to the rate at which the prices of goods and services increase over time, resulting in a decrease in the purchasing power of money. When inflation occurs, each unit of currency buys fewer goods and services than before. For example, if inflation is 3% annually, a product that costs $100 today will cost $103 next year. Inflation affects everything, from the food you buy to the transportation you use. While a small amount of inflation is normal in growing economies, too much inflation can lead to economic instability. Central banks, like the Federal Reserve, often target a specific inflation rate, around 2% in many countries, because they believe that moderate inflation encourages spending and investment, which are vital for economic growth. 2. The causes of inflation. Inflation can be triggered by several factors. The first is demand-pull inflation, which occurs when demand for goods and services exceeds supply. For example, if consumer spending increases during a booming economy, companies may raise their prices due to increased demand. Another cause is cost-push inflation, which happens when production costs, such as labor or raw materials, rise, and companies pass on those higher costs to consumers through price increases. Finally, inflation can result from an increase in the money supply. When central banks print more money or lower interest rates, the value of money can decrease, causing inflation. This can happen if the government borrows heavily or if there's an oversupply of currency in circulation. 3. Measuring inflation. The most common way to measure inflation is through the Consumer Price Index, CPI, which tracks the price changes of a basket of goods and services that households typically buy. These include items like food, clothing, transportation, and healthcare. The CPI is used to calculate the inflation rate, showing how much prices have increased over a specific period. Other indexes, such as the Producer Price Index, PPI, focus on price changes from the perspective of the producers of goods. The inflation rate calculated from these indexes helps policymakers make decisions about monetary policy. A rising CPI means inflation is increasing, while a falling CPI indicates deflation. 4. The impact on purchasing power. One of the most immediate effects of inflation is a reduction in purchasing power, which means the value of money decreases over time. If you have $1,000 today and inflation is 3%, you will only be able to buy what $970 could purchase a year from now. Essentially, inflation erodes the real value of your money. This is particularly noticeable for people with fixed incomes or savings. For example, retirees relying on pensions or Social Security payments may find their income doesn't go as far as it once did, even though their payments remain the same. Over time, inflation can significantly alter your ability to afford goods, services, and even housing as prices climb. 5. The effect on savings. Inflation can be especially damaging to savings if your money is kept in low-interest accounts. For example, a savings account that earns 1% interest may not even keep up with inflation if it's running at 3%. This means the value of your money is effectively shrinking in real terms. If you're not investing your money in ways that outpace inflation, like in stocks, real estate, or other growth assets, your purchasing power decreases over time. Even if you add to your savings regularly, the growth may not match inflation rates, which is why it's essential to seek higher-yielding financial products that can help protect your money from losing value in an inflationary environment. 6. Impact on investments. Inflation influences different types of investments in various ways. For example, during periods of high inflation, the stock market might see volatility as companies face higher costs for raw materials and labor. If companies can't pass these increased costs on to consumers, their profits may shrink, affecting stock prices. However, certain investments like real estate, precious metals like gold, and commodities tend to perform well during inflationary periods, as their value rises with increased prices. Investors often turn to these inflation hedges as a way to preserve or grow their wealth. Bonds can also be impacted by inflation. When inflation rises, interest rates typically increase, which can reduce the value of existing bonds with lower yields. 7. Inflation and interest rates. Inflation and interest rates have a close relationship. When inflation is high, central banks often raise interest rates to cool down the economy. Higher interest rates make borrowing more expensive and saving more attractive, which reduces spending and investment. This helps reduce demand in the economy, putting downward pressure on prices. Conversely, when inflation is low or the economy is sluggish, central banks may lower interest rates to encourage borrowing and spending. Low interest rates make it cheaper to take out loans, which stimulates demand for goods and services and helps boost the economy. However, raising interest rates to combat inflation can also slow economic growth, making it a delicate balance for central banks to manage. 8. The impact on wages. Inflation can put pressure on wages, especially if they don't keep up with the rising cost of living. If prices rise by 3% a year, but wages only increase by 1%, the real purchasing power of your income is actually shrinking. This can lead to dissatisfaction among workers as they struggle to afford the same goods and services as before. In an ideal world, employers would raise wages in line with inflation to ensure employees maintain their standard of living. However, wage increases are often tied to economic conditions, and during times of inflation, businesses may be reluctant or unable to raise wages at the same rate as inflation, resulting in a decrease in the quality of life for many workers. 9. Inflation and debt. Inflation can have a mixed effect on debt, depending on the type of debt you have. For those with fixed-rate debts, such as a mortgage or personal loan, inflation can actually be beneficial. As inflation erodes the value of money, the real value of your debt decreases, making it easier to pay back in the future. For example, if you owe $100,000 on mortgage today, but inflation causes wages and the general economy to rise, the $100,000 debt will be easier to repay with future earnings. However, for those with variable rate debt, inflation can have the opposite effect. As inflation rises, interest rates usually follow, causing the cost of servicing debt to increase, which can strain household budgets. 10. Long-term impact on retirement. Inflation can have a significant long-term impact on retirement planning. Over decades, even moderate inflation can erode the purchasing power of the money you set aside for retirement. If inflation averages 3% per year, the value of $100,000 in today's money will only be worth around $40,000 in 30 years. This is why retirement planners often recommend that you invest in assets that have historically outpaced inflation, such as stocks, bonds, or real estate. Failing to account for inflation in retirement planning can result in having less income in retirement than expected, potentially forcing you to adjust your lifestyle or work longer than planned. So there you have it. Inflation is more than just rising prices. It's a financial force that impacts everything from your paycheck to your retirement savings. The good news is, with the right knowledge and strategies, you can protect your money and even thrive during inflationary periods. Make sure to like this video if you found it helpful, and leave a comment below with your thoughts or any questions you might have about inflation. Don't forget to subscribe for more insightful financial tips, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.